Good morning, my dear POLIS members and dear POLIS friends. It's such an immense pleasure to welcome you here in the beautiful city of Leuven, our current POLIS president, but also my hometown, so I'm not biased at all. But still, it seems that you agree with me because we have broken our record again with more than 900 participants that we're welcoming here to this year's POLIS Conference, so thank you for that. Now let me start by reassuring you, this year we have made sure that the railway strike is not during the conference, but is next week. So that's good news, and you're very welcome. Now, of course, this wouldn't be the POLIS Conference if we didn't have a little bit of disruption, so I was frantically checking the weather forecast over the past couple of days, and maybe it's time to bring up that famous saying, which is, there is no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. I mean, weather forecasts are ranging from very cold to rain, showers to snow, so let's hope that they are wrong as they usually are. But in any case, a big shout out to those of you who have rented a bicycle and cycled to the venue, including myself. Yeah. I mean, this is the look on our face when it starts raining, right? That's how we feel, totally realistic. And I'm sure it was also the look on the face of the people here at Brabantal when just 2 days ago, the rain started pouring straight through the ceiling. For those of you who are not living in Belgium, we've been having non-stop rain for the last couple of weeks, so I lost count of the number of times that I got wet on my bicycle. But all jokes aside, I mean, extreme weather is what we might be expecting more and more in the future. And that's why we are so proud that our members are also taking the lead in working towards climate neutrality and taking responsibility. In times of growing populism, we need forward-looking leaders who are not afraid to turn the keys that they hold in their hands to make our future more sustainable. Just last Thursday, the city of Leuven, as a mission city, presented its very first climate city contract to the European Commission. And who better than the mayor himself, indeed, applause, who better than the mayor himself of this beautiful city can tell us all the great things that they are doing here. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mayor Mohamed Ridouani.
Good morning to you all. First of all, welcome to Leuven. Leuven, the capital of Vlaams-Brabant, the province, an ancient old city, but I hope that you sense that we are very young at heart. And some will explain to you that we are, in first place, the hometown of Stella Artois. Others will point out, and that's at least as important, that we are, foremost, the hometown of our beautiful university, the KU Leuven, which has been here for like 600 years and has shaped our city. In fact, 1 out of 3 inhabitants is either a student or a researcher. That gives a very vivid dynamic to our city. Our approach to mobility, as in your cities, is of course very much focused on the quality of life, on connecting people, and make sure that our cities are accessible, easy to move around as individuals, but also efficient in moving around logistics and goods, for example. And it is my belief that as policymakers, mobility policy cannot be looked at without looking at urban planning, spatial planning, because that allows you to provide proximity of the services that you need. Schools, healthcare services, locations for leisure, culture, sports, etc., which makes that people can sense a feeling of belonging in their communities, and that's how you contribute to this quality. By organizing public space differently than we did in the past, public space like some kind of rest space after you put the buildings and all that you need, and then it's then used for traffic. Today, in our European cities, I see that public space is meant for pedestrians, for cycling, for encounter, and for a well-being on that matter. As has been told by Karen, our mobility policy should contribute and is a backbone to our climate policy. In Leuven, we have what we call Leuven 2030. It's a kind of governance model where there is a shared decision-making system between city, the university and knowledge institutions, our companies, NGOs. In fact, we collaborate together to make sure that we become climate neutral by 2030. And within that framework, of course, we need to focus on the built environment, natural solutions, waste and water management, circular economy. But mobility is a critical part of it, as we saw that in my city, 25% of emissions come from mobility and traffic. So the transition towards sustainable mobility is quite crucial. And this approach has been seen by the European Commission, and they awarded us in 2020 the Capital of Innovation, and we were very proud of that. If I look at the results today, Leuven is the #1 cycling city in Belgium. If you go to the city center, you will sense that. And our inhabitants use the bicycle as the #1 mode to go to work. So that's quite unique in Belgium, at least. Ladies and gentlemen, Leuven is a big fan of the POLIS network because it allows us to share and care with other cities and regions in Europe. And I believe that together we can build those places that provide this high quality of life and that for our citizens. But at the same time, it is also my belief that it is in cities that we can cope with the challenges of our time, because the societal change is felt locally, so we need to find the solutions and implement them locally. I wish you all a fruitful Congress and a memorable stay in Leuven. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohamed Ridouani. Some local Leuven chocolates for you. And as Mohamed was mentioning already, we are also a vibrant university town. And of course, the KU Leuven, the University of Leuven, has a crucial role to play in that. And so we are therefore delighted that KU Leuven became a POLIS member as well this year. So that's really wonderful. It's also my own university, of course. And we are very happy to welcome now the Vice-Rector of KU Leuven, Gerard Govers.
Thank you very much, Karen. It was also the first time that music accompanied my rising to the stage in my entire career. So that's a first. Ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all apologize our rector. He is not here because he is recovering from a very nasty fall he made in Australia. It will take still a while before our rector is really up to full speed. I'll try my very best to replace him. And let me first of all begin by welcoming you here in Leuven, our small university city. We are really happy to have you here. POLIS is working on a very important theme, urban mobility. That is really crucial to a lot of things. It's also a theme where contradictions or controversies are embedded. You have accessibility, but you also have congestion. You need mobility, but who is going to carry the burden of that mobility? So your team is really important. Also because if we want to combat climate change, we need also to work on mobility and certainly also on urban mobility, as the mayor has already explained. We are now at a stage where I think everybody in this room will realize, look, it's not one single discipline that's going to solve this issue. Yes, we need engineering, we need a lot of it, and we need technical solutions, but we also need to convince people, we need social acceptance. And very importantly, I think, and sometimes a little bit forgotten still, is that we need to understand human behavior and how humans will respond to certain changes in their environment, which is not such an easy job. So if we want to make progress, we have to bring together scientists, engineers, social scientists from different disciplines to reflect on these very difficult themes or the very difficult topics that are related to urban mobility. Our university is aware of this. That's one of the reasons why we became a member of POLIS, but we also changed our research strategy. We said, look, we have our departments, we have our research units focusing on certain disciplines, and we need them, but we're going to build institutes that will transgress these classical silos and bring together scientists from different disciplines to look at issues such as mobility and urban development. And we have now a KU Leuven Institute of Mobility and the KU Leuven Institute of Urban Studies, and both are strongly connected also with POLIS because they study the urban environment and mobility in the urban environment and try to come up with solutions that are not only related to, let's say, the technicality of things, but are also related to the whole system where people try to move and have to move through cities. We also organize an urban lab here in Leuven where we bring these researchers then together with policymakers from the city of Leuven, but also from other places, where we think about how to implement what we develop as scientific insights and knowledge into a real city environment, because that will finally be, of course, the proof of the pudding. We have to eat it. We believe that we need to develop this further, and that's also why we really are happy to have you here. Because if you look, I had a very short look at your program, your conference program, I'm sorry, and it's really clear that you already embrace this approach, that this is not a conference where only technicians are talking about how to move things faster and more efficiently in a city environment, but where we bring together different disciplines that reflect on the different aspects that are related to mobility issues. So we're really happy to have you here, because it's a road we need to walk. It's not going to be a very easy walk always. There are going to be conflicts. There are going to be strong discussions. There are different interests involved. So it's not going to be easy. But by having this conference here, we're taking one small step on this road, and I'm sure we'll continue on this road together. I wish you a very interesting conference, a very enjoyable stay here in Leuven, and lots of fun around this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerard Govers. And indeed, you have touched upon many essential points that will be discussed at this very conference. So very much on point, your introduction, I would say. Now, a bit more about the theme of this plenary now, which is, it's the economy stupid. And let me just start by using that as a bridge to thank our sponsors. I mean, they have made this conference a success, and we should recognize that. So thank you very much for that. These are our premium sponsors, and in addition, we have a lot of exhibitors as well. And I invite you to have a look at our exhibition area, not now, during the breaks, when some of these sponsors will also be pitching their solutions to you. Now, coming back to the theme of the session, so we want to explore how a thriving economy and sustainable mobility can go hand in hand, and that comes also back to the point of the multidisciplinary approach that we need when we talk about mobility. But also, we want to show how they can mutually reinforce each other and don't have to be the irreconcilable opposites that sometimes people say they are. So we will look into the different economic aspects and implications of a transition to sustainable mobility, including the impact of CO2 and emission reduction and electrification on industrial competitiveness and the workforce, the potential of the green economy and how to further boost it, and the internalization of external costs, making the polluter pay. But also we'll be talking about how economy and ecology really can go hand in hand and should go hand in hand in the context of city logistics, for example. Urban freight keeps our economy going, but also comes with negative externalities. And we'll also be reflecting, so many things to discuss, on what the viable business model is for shared mobility services, something that Leuven is also actively promoting and encouraging. Now, we cannot be talking about economic and environmental aspects of sustainable mobility without also bringing in the social dimension. And that's why I would like to remind you of the Just Transition agenda that we launched in 2021 in Gothenburg with the start of the Leuven presidency. We launched the Just Transition agenda not just as a document, but really as a a document for action, and we've putting principles into practice throughout the last 2 years together with the city of Leuven. And we're very proud of the Just Transition task force that we established and the webinar series that we've been running throughout this year, which was very successful and also has a great legacy in terms of reports and infographics that you can check by scanning this QR code. Now, the Just Transition theme is also echoed in the brand new issue of our Cities in Motion magazine called A City for Whom, that you can download now. It's live, but don't start reading yet. I would suggest that you do that on your way back when you are leaving this conference. So, let me introduce now the next speaker to you, and let me start with sad and bad news. I got a phone call from Magda Kopczyńska last night that unfortunately there is an emergency in relation to Ukraine which is preventing her from being here in person. But to compensate a little bit for that, we do not only have a video speech from Magda, we also have a surprise act, a surprise appearance from a very dear and old friend who is no longer in the mobility world, and we still miss him every single day. Matthew Baldwin, where are you?
Everybody, it's great to be back. I didn't expect this. I'm actually here not to represent the European Commission, though I still work for them. I'm here to represent the absolutely fabulous group called Heroes for Zero, who are fighting for road safety in Brussels. So please join us if you're from Brussels. But I'm also got a phone call last night from Magda Kopczyńska, a great friend and colleague, and the all-new Director General for Mobility and Transport in the Commission. And she is indeed stuck. She's recorded a fabulous video, but she asked me to step up and say a few words about her. If you don't know her, Magda is passionate about mobility, passionate about the Green Deal, and passionate about delivering the safe and sustainable urban mobility that Europe needs. She's going to tell you all about that now, but please work with her. She's going to be a tremendous asset to POLIS as an organization, and I'm so sorry on her behalf that she can't be with us. But watch her video and watch this space. Thanks, Karen.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, or I should actually say good evening, because this is evening when I'm recording that. First and foremost, I owe you an apology, because the plan was, of course, that I join you in person, but I had to excuse myself due to some last-minute urgent meeting related to Ukraine. I would really prefer to do that in person, and you will have to forgive me if you're listening to a speech that would sound a bit different if I were delivering it myself than now when you're just seeing me on a screen. Having said that, I'd like to really thank Karen Vancluysen for inviting me to contribute to this year's annual POLIS Conference, and in particular this opening session with such a thought-provoking theme. The discussion around the link between a thriving economy and sustainable mobility is important. And the question whether these reinforce each other, that is really the million-dollar question. I certainly think that there is a mutually beneficial connection, and I truly believe that making sustainable mobility a reality within and around cities is not merely an environmental imperative. It is also a powerful catalyst for economic growth and prosperity. And this is exactly what the European Green Deal is about. And this is also the starting point on which the Commission has built the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy back in 2020 and the new Urban Mobility Framework in 2021. Let's not forget that transport contributes around 5% to European Union GDP and employs more than 10 million people in Europe, being critical for European businesses and global supply chains. At the same time, as you all know, this is not without costs to our society. The increasing number of people living in cities and its impact on urban transport systems is becoming critical. An increasing number of people needs to have access to public transport, while authorities seek more sustainable models and solutions to reduce congestion, ensure efficient urban planning, and accelerate the transition towards climate neutrality. We need a more resilient, smarter, and more sustainable urban mobility system, which is also key to the overall resilience of the transport system and the economy. Smart and resilient transport services and infrastructure for both people and goods are vital to fully develop the economic strength of all regions across Europe and stimulate future sustainable growth. And competitive and sustainable transport services are essential to accommodate mobility, logistics and delivery needs within and around cities. But then, of course, comes the question, how do we make it happen? The conference today has been welcomed by Mayor Ridouani in Leuven in a symbolic, dynamic and forward-looking city. Leuven was awarded in 2020 the award of European Capital of Innovation, and it is also committed to a very ambitious green transition objective, being part of the 100 EU cities that want to become climate neutral by 2030. There are many other cities like Leuven across Europe, and they are showing us the way forward. We want to help these cities achieve the ambitious targets set by European Green Deal, while at the same time maintain a thriving economic environment. Coming back again to the question of this opening plenary. Investing in sustainable modes of transport, such as electric vehicles, public transport and cycling infrastructure, can create ripple effects of positive outcomes. The development and adoption of green technologies in the transport sector can spur innovation, leading to the creation of new industries and job opportunities. With the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, we have set out a roadmap for putting European transport firmly on the right track for the future. We also proposed a new EU urban mobility framework to support EU cities to reduce emissions and improve mobility in a sustainable manner. We have put public transport and active modes under the spotlight and promoted firmly a proactive and participatory planning approach with our Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. We want to see stronger collective public transport as a backbone of urban mobility, together with walking and cycling, as well as complemented by new shared mobility services. That complementarity between them should provide travellers with safe, reliable and accessible mobility options. And an urban transport of quality will definitely attract employers. More recently, and I'm sure you know it, we have also adopted a proposal to the European Parliament and the Council for a joint European declaration on cycling, first ever, by the way. That declaration highlights the importance to create more and better cycling infrastructure, together with clear commitments to improving its quality, quantity, continuity and attractiveness, increasing safety for vulnerable road users, including cyclists, and improving connectivity between suburban and rural areas and city centres. Greater uptake of cycling means also stimulating and creating the conditions for more high-quality local jobs and is beneficial to the EU economy and cycling industry, making the sector more attractive and enabling important job-to-job transitions from other relevant industries. Cycling is not only a means of transportation, but also a form of sustainable tourism with strong added value for the European economy. Both public transport and active mobility are what makes a city vibrant. However, we must not forget freight transport and urban logistics. Freight transport is the backbone of our single market and an enabler of our trade with the rest of the world. In cities, urban logistics is essential to the functioning of urban economies. It ensures that food and other goods are restocked in shops, delivers parcels to our door and materials to building sites, removes household waste from our streets. At the same time, lorries and delivery vans create carbon emissions, air pollution, urban noise and traffic congestion. Therefore, reducing the impact of urban freight transport is vital to deliver more livable, clean and prosperous cities. But a more sustainable urban logistics should not come at the expense of the sector's competitiveness or a city's economic growth. In this new EU urban mobility framework, we acknowledge that an economically viable and sustainable logistics requires at least two elements: innovation and collaboration. Through the research and innovation programme Horizon Europe, we are already supporting clean urban logistics of tomorrow, With approximately 60 million euro just in the first 2 calls for proposals, we are encouraging logistics stakeholders to develop new solutions. But even game-changing technologies are not sufficient on their own. That is why in the research projects, we ask logistics operators to work together with the cities to pilot and demonstrate the innovative solutions in living labs. Collaboration between public authorities, private operators, and even citizens and customers is key to develop the right policies for the mutual benefit of all the stakeholders, to create the necessary regulatory and market conditions for sustainable solutions, and foster openness to change. We should not forget our innovative European startups looking at sustainable urban mobility as an opportunity. We should further support them. Looking at the immediate future, I would also like to mention that urban mobility aspects have been strengthened with the proposal for a revised TEN-T regulation. Our proposal recognizes the role of cities as an important element of the European transport network, which is the backbone of the economy. A lot of backbones today. But that's because we talk about cities, and cities are so important. A new challenge and an opportunity for all to collaborate for a sustainable transport system that delivers a sustainable economy. Sustainable urban transport is a great investment. Being able to move sustainably, efficiently, and affordably enables equity and creates access to jobs and education. Switching to electric transport can also enhance our energy independence. I think that's plenty of arguments. Now we just need to put it in practice. I believe it's important to reframe our understanding of relationship between a thriving economy and sustainable mobility and start seeing them as mutually reinforcing pillars of a prosperous and resilient society. Because as we invest in green transportation solutions, we not only safeguard our environment, but also unlock new economic opportunities, promote social inclusivity, and build a sustainable foundation for future generations. And I know that this is exactly what today's conference, that I will miss so badly, will be about. Please have a great conference, and I look forward to meeting you at the next closest opportunity. Thank you.
Great to have Magda still on video. She did record this last night. And also great that she really tailored her speech to the theme of this plenary. And more, it's interesting to see how in English people always pronounce Leuven as Leuven, you know. They're loving Leuven. Isn't that great? So let me now introduce you to the keynote speaker of our plenary session. Philippe Crist is an international expert on mobility innovation and foresight, and at the core of all his work is the conviction that policies must serve people in their day-to-day lives, and that technology only helps when it helps all of us, and not just a few of us. Philippe has been involved in many reports and studies on innovation and transport policy, including topics such as urban space reallocation, data governance, shared mobility, mobility as a service, automation, etc. And those of you who have heard Philippe speak will agree with me when I say that there is no one who can put hardcore, in-depth knowledge and expertise on urban mobility into such poetic words as he does. Philippe, the stage is yours.
Thank you. I hope over the next 2 days you'll be loving Leuven as much as I do. And I hope also that I will have been invited to speak to you today about the economy because of my expertise on that topic, not on the stupid part of the title. I'll talk about the economy addressing not its mechanisms, but its function and its nature, perhaps in the spirit of the cautionary words spoken by Joan Robinson in 1955. And I'll do that by touching on 3 things. What do we mean by the economy? How must we transform the economy? And what can cities do in this transition? So, what is the economy? Or more exactly, what does the economy do? Oikonomia, to the classical age Greek philosophers who first wrote about it, was the art, more than the science, of keeping our house, in the broad sense of the word, in good order. Contrast that with the generic modern definition of the economy as the process or system by which goods and services are produced, sold, and bought. Now, to the Greeks, the economic rationality meant to attain the good life, as they understood it, to participate in the affairs of the polis, of the city-state, to explore philosophical and other social or spiritual pursuits, and to resist the impulse of excessive material consumption. Much of contemporary economics is devoid of such an ethical base. It is agnostic as to what the ends are. We trust in economics, in modern economics, that the cumulative self-interested choices of billions of who we believe are rational agents, people, result in a greater good that, because it is the cumulative representation of all of those choices, is worthwhile in and of itself. Spoiler alert, this approach did not do as well as we would have hoped to. While much of modern economics may not concern itself with the answer of why or what for, it does have a singular focus and steadfast focus on the how. And that how is growth. As children, we firmly believe that if something is good, then more of it is better. 1 scoop of ice cream is good, but 2 is better, and 3 even better. But then we grow up, and we come to realize that too much of a good thing can be bad. Now, seen in this light, economics has not quite yet matured out of a childhood trust that evermore is always best. Or even worse, that economics has entered its adolescence with an annoyingly blind faith holding that belief to be incontrovertibly true. Ask most economists, ask most decision makers, public or private, what it is that the economy does, and the answer will be it enables and drives growth in material throughput and output. Always more growth. And let's be honest, this focus has paid off since the late 18th century. Economic growth has led to unheralded progress. Globally, we have never lived longer, been schooled more extensively, been freer to act with agency in our own lives, or experienced greater bounds in material human development. But this growth, as we've heard, has not been without costs. Costs that reflect the diminishment of the very things that enable life on Earth and that enable the economy to exist. Costs that ironically and alarmingly fall out of most forms of economic reckoning. And foremost among these costs has resulted from the accelerated transfer of fossil carbon into our atmosphere that has fueled economic growth, all the while raising global temperatures to levels increasingly incompatible with the conditions of life which have given rise to everything humans have ever achieved over our brief tenure on this planet. Though we live with seemingly unlimited desires, our planet is finite. The Stockholm Resilience Center has mapped 9 critical planetary boundaries we must not cross in order to sustain life on Earth as we know it, and thus sustain our economy. In 2009, we had crossed 3 of these. In 2023, we have crossed 6 of 9, and trends are worsening, not improving. The economics of ever more are leading to a world of ever less. If ever we have had a global Houston, we have a problem moment, it is now. But unlike those astronauts, we have no backup command center to talk us back to safety. Only ourselves. The economy that has gotten us to this point will not be the one that steers us back to a safe harbor. It is clear that just shoveling cheap nature into the economic furnace is not going to work as it has in the past. So what is the turn we must make? What is the shift in our thinking, in our economic model that will allow us to, now pardon a Tennessee expression, unfuckify the economy? There is no simple answer. We must acknowledge that we cannot just jump from one economic framework to another. We depend on today's economy for our livelihoods, for its ability to generate wealth necessary to fuel investment in more sustainable pathways. But we cannot depend on today's economic model to get us to that sustainability. We are, to take a vehicular analogy, trying to steer the transition with one foot hard on the gas pedal while we're pulling hard on the handbrake, and we have all but run out of road. Whatever we do, we'll have to address 3 system errors. The first is what it is that we want the economy to do, what it must optimize. The second are a series of measurement errors we must address. And the final one is a casting error we must overcome. Now, when James Carville, the US Democratic Party campaign strategist, posted the words, "The economy stupid," in the 1992 election campaign war room, he meant it as a reminder that voters, that people care about the economy first, second, and last. But people are concerned about the economy not just for the sake of the economy, but because of what it enables them to do. And here, too often, we conflate what it is the economy allows us to physically obtain and what it is that the economy allows us to immaterially attain. The focus on growth for growth's sake has proven problematic and untenable, but it has lifted masses out of a material deprivation to a point where a better life is possible. So it is understandable that we believe that the economic model that has gotten us this far will be the model that will help us reach happiness, reach fulfillment, improved quality of life. The evidence says otherwise. To start with, growth has delivered its benefits inequitably. The poorest half of the world earn less than 7% of total income, whereas the wealthiest 1% of the world earn 21% of global income. The wealthiest 10% of the world deliver half of the global income. The economic returns on growth, even where it is better distributed as it is here in Europe, are not well distributed. And in many places, this is getting worse. There is anger that comes with exclusion from the economy and its fruits, just as there is fear that comes from the unequal impact of economic and environmental whiplash. Ignoring this fragilizes trust in government and our democracies. And we must also understand that past a certain point, growth doesn't automatically lead to a better quality of life. Nobel Prize-winning economists Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee underscore that increasing GDP does not necessarily mean a rise in human well-being, and that its pursuit can sometimes be counterproductive. Economists, sociologists, psychologists, cognitive biologists, all studying the mechanisms of happiness and fulfillment, show that once economic growth meets our material needs, its contribution to life satisfaction drops. Those having studied the question point to the need for our economies to optimize for something beyond growth, something like prosperity. Prosperity, for the economist Tim Jackson, is about the quality of our lives and our relationships, about the resilience of our communities, about our sense of individual and collective meaning. Jackson's work, the work of the OECD on alternative metrics and other models of the economy, the work of emerging schools of economic thought, all point out that we can have prosperity without aggregate growth, but that growth alone will not lead to prosperity. Kate Raworth, the economist and mother of the concept of donut economics, says it succinctly and clearly: we need economies that make us thrive, not just survive. Now, several measurement errors hamper our ability to transform our economies. The Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz cautions us: what we measure shapes what we do, and so if we measure the wrong thing, we do the wrong thing. A first and fundamental measurement error is that we conflate gross domestic product, or GDP, with what it is that we want the economy to do. Now, GDP sets no qualitative difference on the object of our spending. For GDP, expenditure on prisons and schools is equivalent, as is spending on preventative health care versus costly downstream medical treatments. But clearly, schools and health matter more. Measuring the economy only with GDP and only in view of its growth misses what the economy should be enabling us to attain. Now, I've mentioned prosperity, but even more fundamentally, surely the economy should be contributing to more happiness. Now, the United Nations World Happiness Report looks at what makes people happy, what makes society happy around the world. And what it consistently finds is that GDP only explains a small part of what contributes to happiness. What are the other contributors to happiness? Social support, healthy life expectancy, freedom to make life choices, generosity, lack of corruption, things that GDP cannot and does not measure and thus does not account for. Another crucial measurement flaw is that the full costs of many important burdens are not included in the prices markets set. Things like water or air pollution, the physical or mental toll of traffic crashes, habitat loss, climate change. These so-called external costs are substantial. In Europe, they accounted for 716 billion euros in 2016, almost 8 trillion euros if you include congestion. Now, for some, these externalities are a bug in the system. But under a more critical eye, these externalities are not so much a bug in the system, so much as they are a design feature of the economy, hard-baked into its functioning because of the assumptions and the metrics that we use. So when, as we saw recently with the discussion around Euro 7 standards, substantial decisions are made that must balance significant externalities, in this case, deadly air pollution, borne by all, with the economic vitality of a single, although important industry, we must ask ourselves, irrespective of the outcome of what we believe to be right, why is our economic framework failing to integrate these costs and benefits by default and by design? Another glaring measurement error is all that our economy is blind to, all that it excludes from its calculus. And first among these is the productive work that enables households to partake in other economic activity, the unpaid and devalued work of care for family, for those in need, and for the maintenance of the very households on which our economies are built. Tellingly, when Adam Smith, one of the founding fathers of modern economics, wrote his opus, The Wealth of Nations, he did so after having moved back into his mother's home to be cared for and fed by her, as he wrote. Needless to say, she was unpaid for her work and invisible to his theorizing on the functioning of the economy. This invisible, unvalued economy represents 15 to 27% of GDP across OECD countries and even more elsewhere. In some instances, unpaid care contributes more to the economy than the manufacturing, commerce, or transport sectors. And it will be no surprise to at least half of you that women create the majority of that economic value. Now, on that note, let me just say a few words on the casting error we commit when we think of the economy. And here, I would just reiterate that we need to seek voices beyond those that have led us to the unsustainable economy that we have today. We need non-economists and economists who do not hide behind the specialist jargon of their field. And in particular, I would advise you to turn to women economists, not because they're more likely to have the right answers, but because it has been my experience in economics and in life that women generally ask better questions. When so much of economics is devoted to getting precisely the right answer to the wrong question, the ability to ask better questions is a largely untapped superpower. And in the male-dominated field of economics, we see that women economists' views diverge significantly from those of their male counterparts. And this should tell us something about the voices we should open ourselves to in order to shape a more sustainable economy. And so in closing, what of the role of cities in addressing the economic turn I've outlined? What should cities, what should you take from what I've briefly laid out this morning? Use meaningful indicators for measuring wanted outcomes, not just off-the-shelf economic indicators. Monitor real benefits, costs, and burdens, especially those not captured by prevailing economic measurement. Among these, concern yourself first with the costs and burdens that are poorly distributed. Concern yourselves that economic gains are fairly distributed and that people have a voice in how this is done. Where costs and burdens are poorly or not at all captured by economic accounting, be prepared to deploy compensatory measures that nudge these costs back in line with what is tenable and tolerable. Space allocation, parking policy, housing policies, targeted urban access management, all these and other tools form part of the mix that cities have and should deploy to ensure that they can deliver on the mandates that people entrust to their local authorities. Assess how to address economic exclusion and invisibility, how to ensure that productive contributions are not ignored or remain unvalued. Focus on what you can do to prop up the care economy and those who enable it, including in transport. And finally, redefine economic discourse by focusing on the outcomes the economy helps to enable, the outcomes people aspire to, not just on how the economy functions. Understand that fundamentally, the economy is just a model of how human society delivers on prosperity and fulfillment. It is not immutable, and it is continually shaped by consensus regarding what we consider to be a good life. With all that in mind, let me conclude by making a deeply personal reflection, a reflection that I believe is nonetheless relevant for cities as they evolve through time. The other day, I was reading an essay by caregivers describing what those about to leave this world communicated to them in their dying breath. These were moments when people were coming to terms with their personal economy, if you will. The ways in which they made decisions to allocate scarce means to what they needed, to what they desired. And in preparation for this keynote, I reflected on what these people said when confronted with the final ledger of their gains and losses. What regrets will we have for not having consumed more? What discounting will we give to not having laughed more? What value will we give to those moments we sped through our days, not taking the time to sit with those that mattered most to us? What welfare gains will we have realized from having loved less than we could, from having loved less than we should? What monetization of our lives will we be most proud of? What kindnesses will we have most cruelly economized? Because in the end, for all of those people, reflecting on a life soon to slip away, for all of us, it is about the economy, stupid. It was just never about the economy, we thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. Definitely a contributor to happiness is chocolate, so let me give that to you. Thank you for your inspiring and enlightening speech. Main takeaway, women ask the right questions. So, I'm going to be really honest with you. I hope that what we are going for right now is really going to be a heated debate. And why? I am freezing. I'm freezing here on stage. I have a hard time not to have my teeth shattering, so I really count on my panelists to be provocative, to challenge each other, and to not always agree. And I think we have a diversity of panelists here that indeed represent different points of view and will not always be agreeing. But I think what we can agree on is that they all represent stakeholders that are instrumental in making the marriage between sustainability and prosperity work. So let me welcome to the stage Koen Kennis, Deputy Mayor for Mobility at the City of Antwerp, Hanna van Amelsfort, Senior Consultant at Goudappel, Luca De Meo, CEO of the Renault Group, but also President of ASEA, Harriet Tiemens, Director of the Metropolitan Region of Arnhem-Nijmegen, Kevin Main, CEO of Cycling Industries Europe, and Fabien Nonnet, Fulfillment Development, Innovation and Expansion Manager at the IKEA Group, but also part of the Alice platform. Welcome. So as I was saying, I'm counting on all of you to speak your minds and really openly debate the topic of this plenary session. It's the economy stupid. Let me start with addressing a topic which is very contested when we talk about mobility and which is very important as well when we want to transform mobility. It was also mentioned by our mayor, and that is urban space. Harriet, all the way over there, welcome. Ahead of most other countries, actually the Netherlands, and including, of course, Dutch regions and Dutch cities, rebalanced the use of urban space in favor of active travel. You're the leading country from that perspective. But what would you say are the economic benefits that are realized when we diversify the use of our urban space and design it in that way?
Thank you, Karen, for inviting me here and for this question. Well, I see 4 benefits for active mobility. To start with, active mobility provides an inclusive, resilient and sustainable city with less transport poverty. So it's a good, it's a good way to prevent transport poverty. And we are almost world famous for our fast cycling paths, and so people can easily cycle around. And now we have the new target to have 35% of all the travels on bicycle in 2030 in a region. Well, the second economic benefit is that pedestrians and cyclists are better spenders. They spend more in the city center. They visit more often the city center. We had a very nice study this year in the Netherlands among 22 Dutch medium-sized cities. And that investigation shows that cyclists spend average of nearly 95 euros a week in the city, and car drivers 89. And car drivers visit less often the city center than pedestrians and cyclists. So it's better for the shops in the city to have more cyclists and pedestrians. And of course, city centers, they suffer from online shopping. And another thing is that with less cars, you have more public space to use for terraces and other things that are nicer to look at, and that's car parkings. Well, the third is reducing congestion, and that's for sure. This cycling infrastructure helps to connect top economic locations even better. In many cases, it gives better access to business parks and reduces congestion. And the last one, reduce health and care costs. There's another investigation in our country about, for example, an employee who swaps the car for a bicycle 3 days a week and cycles 11 kilometers to work. And that provides the employer 1,800 euros less cost for sick days, better productivity, and also more fitness. And it's also better for the employer itself. It's about 1,600 euros a year. That's on a normal bike. If you use an e-bike, it's a bit less, but still significant. It's about 600 euros a year, less on healthcare costs. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Okay, great, great proof as well of indeed the fact that active travel brings economic benefit. And I can confirm I'm a cyclist and I'm a great shopper, so it goes hand in hand. And I haven't had one single sick day. I don't want to jinx it, but I haven't had one single sick day either this year. Kevin, do you agree? I'm sure there must be some agreement that the reallocation of space can go together with a vibrant local economy, right?
I think it's important to reflect on what Philippe said about our definitions of economy. And you make the point here about local economy. But often we hear, like, local economy, a city or a region has a big win because they attracted a factory to the suburbs, or they attracted some industrial investment. And that's very much also the reflection of nation states and of the European Union, that you must find a home for industry. And as an industrial organization, we find a home for new bicycle factories or new battery factories or new processes. But in our world, actually, 80% of our jobs are locally delivered and can only be delivered locally. And they form part of what I think the cliche is the proximity economy. Mm-hmm. And that reflects not where people go, but where they stop and where they move and where they buy coffee, and that they reflect, where they take their kids to school. And we, of course, post-pandemic, saw that move from city cores, which is a struggle economically, to suburban hubs and villages and those kind of areas. And we've got a lot of rebalancing to do if we're going to get local defined and understand that. But clearly, I agree with Gerard, the evidence says if you can get people to stop and stop often, to shop and purchase and create wealth through employment in their locale, you get that underpinning vibrant economy. And what makes people want to go there? I mean, employers fighting for talent discover that people like living in vibrant cities with spaces for themselves and their children and for their activities and a great nightlife. They discover people want to live in cities where they feel safe, which is about well-lit streets and streets that are busy and that are used. And, people are threatened by dark car parks or by areas that are not so good to kind of visit and to stop. So definitely all the indicators, and I wish I had all your numbers, we must exchange, because, but that city vibrancy is about being in place, feeling safe in a road safety context, and then spending both time and money and generating employment in those spaces. So the space is what creates that. It creates that vibrancy. But what you're achieving economically is making people stop, not travel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you were talking about rebalancing. Let me pick up on that, because part of that rebalancing exercise is also that cities are revisiting the role of parking and the space that this has been taken up, the tremendous space that this has been taking up in our cities. And then I'm talking about car parking, obviously. Hannah, you are an international expert on pricing policies, and so what potential do you see for more strategic parking management, and how can parking pricing policies help us reach sustainability goals, while also recognizing that actually it's been an interesting source of revenue as well? So it's maybe a sector that is in disruption.
Yes, thank you. So it's quite surprising that we're still talking about if pricing or regulation actually is an effective policy measure. I don't think there's a public resource that we don't manage that way. The electricity net, the telecom, public transit even already, water, waste management. Well, in transportation, we're still thinking, is this an effective measure or not, even if all the evidence we have and the years of research that we have point to that this is something that is efficient to do. So with parking management and with parking pricing, we can regulate the market and make it more efficient and be more efficient about space. For cities that have already been doing this and are transforming into a more sustainable city, what I see in many cities around the world is that they have a huge part of the burden, a huge part of the responsibility in solving problems, and a lot less of the mandate or the legal opportunity to actually generate some revenues, or to fund things, or to borrow money to fund new infrastructure for cycling or for public transit or city renewal. Losing parking revenues, which is one of the sources they often have, is a huge issue then. And I don't have all the answers for that either, because it's in the legal framework, but things like value capturing, property taxes, maybe even sales tax or other forms of taxation would be needed for cities to solve the problems that they have, or higher levels of government need to step up and say, okay, if you're going to solve this city problem, then you need the resources to do that. And that's lacking behind. So we need capacity management and pricing for parking. while at the same time we need to remove maybe the demand for car traffic and parking in the future and compensate for the revenue losses that cities will have from this. Otherwise, we won't get to that sustainable new future.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look at a practical example. Antwerp. Koen, you have recently introduced a new parking policy in Antwerp, which is ambitious and has been applauded, included by people working for the mobility department in Leuven. So can you tell us a bit more about what you are doing?
Yes, perhaps first, I think when we look to mobility, it's very important that we look to all modes of mobility. And the mayor of Leuven, Mohamed, you have to change your speech. Also in Antwerp, the bike is the first way to go to work. 42% of workers are using the bike for their transport. 36% still use also the car. And be careful, the car will stay, of course, a part of our life, also in cities. And then you need to think about how we organize parking, and especially in the 16th century part of Antwerp, it's more or less 3 square meters, 3 square kilometers, of course. We are looking how can we organize the best our parking space. A lot of inhabitants were complaining that they don't find parking space anymore, and we don't want to lose our inhabitants because they can't park their car in the city. So we said, okay, it's logically in that area of the city, because there are also a lot of public parkings, that the commuters and also the people who visit the city go to the public parkings and not on our streets. So we have said now the streets are still available for the inhabitants and some other people who are allowed. It's very restricted, and all the others have to go to the public parking space. Of course, it's much more. We have also parking rights around the city, but our parking policy in the whole city, and that's important. This is a small part of the city. It's very especially the touristical part of the city. For the rest of the city, we stay working on a parking policy that says you have to park on your own territory. You have to park in your apartment building or in your own garage or a place where you can hire, as much as possible, also for inhabitants and other visitors. And there we try to keep that on, to slowly, and not immediately, but slowly make the streets more available for other things. But it is something that is going very, very slow, because today and historically, a lot of people are parking on the street, and you want to move them. You want not that you say, okay, and now it's not obliged to have a car anymore, so move somewhere else if you want to have a car, and not in the city. No, that's not our idea. Inhabitants are welcome, and yes, a car is some of the things that will be part of life also in the future, but we want to organize it as much as possible. So our car policy, this part that was uploaded, is a small part in a complete policy on parking, where in fact we try to diminish cars slowly, gradually from the public domain, bringing them underground or in parking spaces where people can park cars.
Okay, great. Well, urban space is one thing, of course, but there's also the issue that we are struggling with in cities, and that's to meet air quality targets. We are working towards climate neutrality, as was mentioned before, as well in our cities, and it does require measures, Luca de Meo, that also will internalize the external costs of polluting traffic, including measures such as introducing urban vehicle access regulations. They come with a high political cost very often, but they're also necessary to address the challenges that cities are facing. But what challenges is that kind of measure bringing to you as a sector, to the car industry? But also maybe there are opportunities in terms of which vehicles are being prioritized or which ones that are being penalized.
Look, I guess I'm the bad boy today. So I've been listening to everybody, and you know, apart from the mayor here, that I thank for his holistic approach to the thing, including different mobility modes that will stay forever. I mean, all the rest, underlying theories that we put people on a bike in Europe and we will save everything. But this is actually surreal. It's totally surreal, concept, because when you look at facts, okay, actually 80% of the movements in Europe are still done on tires, between trucks and cars. You have maybe 6-7% on buses, on train, etc. And the movement in bikes, not in frequency, but in distance, they are single digit. Of course, they are improving, thanks God, okay? But this is the reality of the thing. So we have to start it. The elephant in the room is that the people continue to massively use cars and trucks to transport goods. And in the last 10-15 years, we've seen e-commerce going up. So last mile logistics is, is getting stronger and stronger, right? This is the reality. That's what the people want, yeah? Because they are not even, there to go take their bike and go to the post office to take a parcel, etc., etc. They want it at home. This is the reality of the stuff. Message number one. Message number two, I think what I hear since, years, etc., is that kind of a confrontation between things. In fact, if we want to reduce the impact, okay, I think this needs to be a teamwork, right? So we don't have to confront technology to another, a mode of transportation to another. We have to I am the first, I'm a citizen like anybody. So if it takes like me an hour and a half to go to work, it's not good for me. If the people start to hate our product, it's game over for us. So we have to work on it, and we have to find solutions. So message number three, the automotive industry in particular that I represent, it's part of the solution. And we have to bring, solution. Last week I presented into another event, a car that is a small electric car, the famous Twingo, etc., that will come back, that will cost less than 20,000 euro. And if you look at the cradle to grave of this product, 75% of the average, let's say, impact that the normal average European car has. That's the kind of solution that we have to solve. We have to propose things. And if we think that the automotive industry is kind of resisting to this thing, then look at the 250 billion euros that we are investing, all of us and our supplier in Europe for the energy transition. 250 billion euro. It's a lot of money. I don't know how many of you are playing with all that money, but we are doing it, okay? There are two problems that sometimes they're mixed up. On one side, you have, the air quality is very concentrated in urban environment, and then you have the CO2, which is a global problem. It's two different things. Yes. Let's not mix the things. Your question comes on the air quality side, right? So the life on the city. My opinion is that we have to limit the, let's say, the access to cities, or we have to enable small electric cars to circulate in the city. That's the most, and vans, okay? So both vans and electric cars. A car, the one I was mentioning before, let's imagine that all the Parisian people are buying a new Twingo, okay? This will free the equivalent of 55 football fields in the Paris intramuros, which is not so big, okay? So it's huge. Yeah, that's the kind of thing we should do, and I believe the industry is open. So far, the regulation in the automotive industry, the only thing they have done in the last 20 years is to push up technology, therefore weight, therefore size of the cars, and this is actually, they didn't work. They actually didn't work, right? So my call is to go back to the, to the origin of the European industry, where we were doing also small cars. We need, of course, for other users, bigger car if you have to do intercity thing. But in the city, people have to, move with their 500, with their thing, all electric. That's our solution, and we are able to propose it in, in a few years and months.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy that you are going for downsizing vehicles, because many of your colleagues or competitors seem to be, making their vehicles bigger and bigger every single day, and that's not what we want to
But
see.
you know,
of course,
it's because the demand is there, so we are there to do, to actually satisfy demand. That's my job, okay? In a model that it's only pushing for growth, as Philippe was saying. So maybe I sympathize with, his theory for sure, but that's the operational system we are in.
Yeah.
So in people like us, they are pushed to growth, right? This is one thing. The other thing is the regulation. There is demand and the regulation that push the cars to higher thing. Someone mentioned the debate on Euro 7, for example. Euro 7 has a huge impact on cost. If you put it on a Fiat 500, it brings the car out of the market and makes the car totally unprofitable. If you put it on a big car, it doesn't have this impact. Result of the story, all the OEMs are going out of the small segments and they are investing on bigger cars. So it means that the thing doesn't work, right? So we have to revise this. And we have examples. If you look at Japan, for example, 40% of the market is what they call K car, very small cars with this very special regulation. For example, if you buy a K car in Japan, you don't have to prove that you have a garage. If you buy a normal car, you have to have a garage. And this is pushing the thing. And then end result is that you see a lot of those small things in Tokyo, in Nagoya, or in Osaka. And that's a good thing. So it's not, rocket science.
Yeah. I understand, of course, that from an industry perspective and a company perspective, you say we provide what the customer wants as well. Of course, what cities have to do, what political leaders have to do, is find a way to reconcile what the individual user wants or thinks he or she needs with what the city as a whole needs, to keep that city healthy as well for everybody and not just for some of them. You also made several references to city logistics, to delivery, so that's also a perfect opportunity for me to turn to Fabien. You represent a big global successful company called IKEA. Sounds familiar to most of the people in the room, I would imagine. But of course, you keep the economy going, but you also come with negative externalities for cities, and also are subject for that reason to urban vehicle access regulations, as I was mentioning before. So how do you try to balance, the economic needs and that you have and that you want to provide for others with the sustainability requirements that cities have?
Yeah. So first, thanks, Karen, for the invitation, and thanks as well to Alice for giving the opportunity to me to be on stage. So I just want also to clarify one thing about IKEA, because I'm sure there are many people here as well in the rooms who don't really understand the way we are organized as a company. So I just want to simply explain that we have two main entities. One is called Inter-IKEA Group. It's a franchisor because we are a franchise concept company. And in the other side, we have 12 franchisees who are basically selling and operating our stores. So the biggest one is called Inca Group, and that's the one where most of the market in Europe belong to. Just to start with that, because I think that's very important that I connect with the next point to answer to your question. For us, the best way to navigate is to have very clear directions. That means that for us, sustainability is really anchored in our long-term strategic direction. So for IKEA, overall, we have three key, we can say, strategic directions. One is to be more accessible for the many people, to be more affordable, and to be more sustainable. Having said that, it's not only to have this as a goal and leave it there. We want to walk the talk, and we want to be consistent. So I can mention from Inter-IKEA perspective, 1st of November was made a big decision in the Inter-IKEA Group Supervisory Board, where we commit to reduce by 50% our greenhouse gas emissions by fiscal year 30. By 2030, to simplify, compared to 2016. And previously, the goal was only 15%. That was defined a few years ago. So we also are accelerating our ambition, and it's really anchored in our day-to-day business. From an Inca Group perspective, where we are more in connection with, I will say, as customers all here, the biggest strategic movement is they commit to achieve zero-emission deliveries by end of 2025 for all Inca Group. Inca Group represents 90% of the stores worldwide. So I was in a running business a few years ago, responsible for last mile in Switzerland. And when I heard about these goals that was announced, I said, are they silly to have such an ambition? 3-4 years ago, I think no one were believing that we can achieve such a thing. But I think it's the way we want to lead by example. We want to have high ambition, and we want to mitigate, as you mentioned, those negative impact we can have on the city, especially because our business model is changing drastically. It's over the time where, today we have our store in the potato field, as we said internally. Now it's time to go back more close to where the people live. And with urbanization, we need to be more close to the city center. And I think it's a good time now to discuss with all key stakeholders, public institutions, logistic companies, and customers as well, to hear our customers, how do we want to be there? And in a, let's say, most economical, we can say, viable way, but also sustainable way.
Okay,
I can sell you a lot of electric and hydrogen van if you want, so I leave you my business card.
Let's do some business
Thank
here
you.
on stage. But it's good to hear that you are engaging, that you are committing, and that you are moving away from the potato fields as well. Leave our potatoes alone. But because we Belgians, fries and so on, we need a lot of them. But coming back to this challenge, that cities are facing, that they have to take essentially unpopular measures to mitigate the negative externalities that they're facing with regard to polluting traffic. It's clear that just carrots alone, which are more popular, are not going to save us. Hannah, you mentioned before that it's interesting, or surprising maybe rather, to see that transport seems to be a sector where this still hasn't sufficiently been integrated in the discourse, that pricing is an essential measure, and that all kinds of regulations that make the polluter pay can be a game changer. So how can we make that step change? Why is this sector lagging behind compared to the other sectors that you were mentioning earlier?
I don't actually know the answer to your last question on the why. I see that we have some kind of a shared vision of what a city we would like to have and how that should function, and the car plays a role in that. I don't think anybody is denying that part. And I also agree with you that we're not there yet. That right now, the situation that we're in is pretty car-oriented and dependent. So there's a transition to be made. And in the transition, there is chaos and there is things change. We need to change behavior. We need to rethink how we see ourselves. And I know how hard that can be to be in a transition. So that's hard. And then the internalization of external cost may not necessarily be a stick. It's easy to think of it as a stick, and for some people it will be. For other people, it could actually be that mobility, even mobility by a car, becomes cheaper than what it currently is. So maybe for the most vulnerable groups, they get more access to mobility, and for the higher power, high income people, it becomes more of a cost issue. So maybe internalizing external costs could add to that donut economy that Philippe talked about as well. Why are we not getting there? It's because of this tension that's also here on stage already between the individual needs of people and their desires. And when you make a buying decision, how do you take into account the collective effect of your decision? We don't do that on a daily basis. The fact that we are in congestion, we don't really feel that we are the cause of that congestion. We think that those other people should have taken public transit so that we can drive.
Yeah.
And there's a market failure there, and pricing can help that market failure. But what we need to get there is to get over this anxiety that we have and trust that, or mistrust that we're having. And that's why a lot of politicians don't dare to make these decisions. And I've spoken with many of them around the world, and I understand this fear of stepping up and doing something that you know will lead to resistance and only will make success after you've done it and have shown that it's effective. And we've seen that in Stockholm and in Gothenburg or in other places around the world where we do these kinds of policies, that after you do it, there's success. But getting there takes a really lot of political courage that we lack sometimes.
Let's have a look at Antwerp again. Koen, you do have a low emission zone. You also recently introduced a parking strategy that we already talked about. So these are maybe more like stick kind of measures, even though it all depends on how you frame them. And I know you're not a fan of prohibition. I know you're a big fan of seducing the citizen. So how do you do that? How do you seduce the citizen then in your way to make the right choices and balance carrots and sticks, or make sticks sound like carrots? I don't know.
First of all, I want to say something on the costs, the external costs. I find it always very strange that we say that only for car or only for cars and trucks and things like that, there are no external costs measured. When you look to the different modes, look to public transport, I don't think they pay taxes, or let's say the traveler doesn't pay taxes. But we have a lot of subsidies to public transport from the states. And I think it's interesting to comparing this type of things. Of course, for cars, there will be built roads already years ago, and they have to be maintained. And that's the same also for trains, for instance. But the car driver pays his taxes on fuel, for instance, pays his taxes to drive with the car. The taxes on fuel, helping us to say, don't drive too much with your car. And those taxes are very high. So please, stop this sort of things. I think everybody pays a part of the problems that we have. Mobility is not a burden. I heard somebody saying, mobility is a burden. For me, mobility shows that there is life. Remember the COVID period? It was a very bad period. It was very bad for economy, and not the economy, but for the shops, the storekeepers, the restaurants, the cafes. They had a very tough time, and they were losing money, a lot money. It was also a very bad period for well-being. We didn't have social contacts. A lot of people get lonely. So mobility is very important, and everybody of us pays on a certain moment mobility as they have to do. Secondly, yes, I believe in seducing people to change their thought on mobility. That's because I don't believe in a revolution, but I believe in an evolution. But also, and that was one thing that, at least one thing that I was agreeing in with Philippe Crist, is that it makes you happy when you have the freedom to make your choices, to make your own choices, and not to be obliged to do what someone else says. Surely when it's from a moral high ground, that statements are coming to people. We have to make sure that people understand that yes, there is the need to a modal shift, and we see in Antwerp also that it's happening. But for instance, we do it by hard measurements, infrastructure, improving bicycle paths makes that more people start bicycling, making sure that you don't have to drive a Paris-Roubaix when you go to work, ensures people that they will use a bike to go to work. And at the same time, we have to help them sometimes. We go, for instance, to employers and say, okay, let's see with you how employees are traveling to work. And if we can let them taste on beforehand what it is to use a bike or what it is to use public transport to go to work, because now they are reluctant to it. And when they try it a week, 2 weeks, a month, a lot of people say, okay, this is fun. Like you said, it's good because you're less ill. It's good because your head is clear when you come home. It's biked out, let's say, all the worries, but also on the other side, employers see that it's working. And these small things, these small improvements make that people really choose to change their habits. And it will be lasting and not because somebody said it and when that somebody is away, I do the other thing again. Yeah. So I believe very strongly that we have to seduce people to make their choices and to make smart choices. And I'm sure that people can make smart choices.
Yeah, we can maybe disagree on the amount of when we need to push a bit in the right direction. And of course, freedom ends where your freedom starts to impact on the freedom of someone else. And that's where we have to find the right balance again. You were mentioning the importance of infrastructure to also nudge people in the right direction, providing for the infrastructure to cycle, for example. And then, of course, we are coming back to the Netherlands, Harriet. What are the major indicators that you are using in your metropolitan region to measure whether or not your mobility ecosystem is successful in view of what you are aiming for? And also, coming back to a conversation we had on a late night in Leuven in a restaurant, do you feel you are aligned with other levels of government in terms of what they prioritize? Livability, air quality, accessibility versus the economic cost of congestion, for example. Remember that conversation?
Yes, I remember that, yes. Well, the short answer is we're struggling with that. We're struggling with, we are a very dense and small country. So there is a lot of pressure on ground, on space. So we have to connect mobility with housing, with green, with nature, with climate adaptation, with drink water as well. But all the things we need to have a nice life and to have a good life in the future. So we're struggling with that. If you talk about, I find the word in English, rural development. And we try to measure that, and we call it in the Netherlands broad welfare. And we also have a broad welfare monitor, and we're struggling with that as well. So we have some indicators about air pollution and about livability and about health and about the quality of life and road safety and all other indicators. But then is the question, how do you, what's the one indicator to the other? And the debate is every indicator for every region the same, or is when you live in a beautiful nature area, is it a pity if you have no access to public transport? That's quite normal if you live like that. So then the indicator is red, for example, but you're very, very healthy and very, very happy. So we're struggling with that, but we try to measure also external costs and also things like social welfare. We try to measure that together in that broad welfare monitor, and we're not there yet.
Yeah. Okay, so indeed rebalancing or balancing different interests and different indicators can be a challenge for sure. So coming back to what Luca De Mea was saying earlier, in reality we're still seeing many cars being used versus other modes, even though the modal share for cycling in Antwerp, for example, is great, in Leuven is great as well, and of course in many Dutch cities too. And something that we've seen happening not just with the cars but also with the bicycles is electrification. I don't want to call it the holy grail because I don't think there is such a thing. But Kevin, the electrification of the bicycle is of course tremendously extending the range of cycling beyond this typical 5 kilometer that we always quote. So what do you think is the further potential of the European bicycle industry in boosting not just the green economy, but also boosting cycling with the electrification dimension that we see happening?
Yeah, thanks. And I think, we're actually aligned, Luca, because, transport change is incredibly tough. Behaviors are entrenched. Industrial systems are entrenched, manufacturing, supply chains, behavior patterns, parking, and just simply, even as you said, Harriet, this kind of idea of the political layers and the different things. So it's not easy. The one thing that caught many people by surprise when they do it was to go, actually, citizens, people, businesses, this thing, e-bikes, from nowhere to kind of 5 million units at relatively low investments. Cargo bikes is a variant being distributed now by Renault, amongst others, and Toyota and others, that they're actually part of that. And it's attracting investment from the car sector, from independent funding, from government. Now, if you look underneath that, we have a trajectory that's something like 2 million jobs beyond 2030, which is almost a doubling of cycling jobs. And it's more labor intensive to maintain the bike fleet, and it's very much in that local economy. So it has a lot of benefits by being kind of localized growth, and all the other sectors are struggling. You know, we know the just transition conversations about the car industry and the number of jobs that could drop out of the system. We know how tough the post-COVID environment is for public transport. And I'm pleased that colleagues in member state governments and cities and the European Commission are actually saying, if we're going to go and look for jobs, let's go and look return on investment, and let's look on where we can create some jobs fairly quickly. We actually need a heck of a lot of the skills the automotive industry's got. So that decline of 500,000 jobs, we're looking for a home for them. Bike industry, hello, we'd quite like some of that skill set, as well as the investments. But the absolute cornerstone of the combined learning of both the e-bike and the kind of pandemic is that the bike and walking piece of the equation can be done very, very fast. We have to wait for the investments and electrification of the automotive fleet. You know, it's a long lead time. The arguments, is it 2035 or is it beyond? What role e-fuels and where will they come from? We can do parts of it now, and at a city level, you have the governance and the investments and the structures and the access to parking. You know, the decision to close a street and make it a cycling walking street is a decision. We all know the fights. We all know it's not an overnight decision in terms of consultations and process, but it's not a 10-year decision. So you can stimulate and trigger change. Maybe it's 10 years in Antwerp, but you can move down those channels. I mean, look at Brussels. You know, biggest pedestrian zone, biggest 30-kilometre-an-hour zone in Europe, and everybody, no disrespect to Brussels colleagues, but let's go back 10 years. Did anybody believe Brussels would do that? Or Paris or others? So it's not just about a boldness, it's about a pure practicality, and let's give the colleagues in other sectors time to make their transitions, because the intercity journeys, the long-distance freight journeys, the shipping and supply journeys have to be done. We're not saying we're going to do those. We're not going up and down the Autobahn on bikes. Agreed, conceded. But it's available now, it's available fast. And the last thing I'll say is, we also have to recognize it's a very, very perverse economics. Right now, globally, 60% of the climate change benefits of electrification are coming from small and two-wheeled vehicles, because they're actually in the marketplace and delivering, and in volume they are there. That's only taking up 4% of the raw materials and manufacturing capacity. 4% gives 60. That's a pretty good bit of short-term news. Can we get anybody to invest in battery production in Europe, in those small batteries? Why would I waste my money investing in 4%? We'll carry on getting them in for China, because that's perverse economics. And at the European Commission or at member states levels, we've actually got to have a different economic analysis that says, well, if it's delivering 60%, why would we risk the supply chain by not being able to produce and recycle and repair and recover and integrate with the car battery sector, for example? But yeah, nobody's going to build a gigafactory for a 4% market share. They're just not going to do it. So we have great, fast, short-term opportunities to do things around active mobility to deliver certain things, but we also need some very conscious structural, same conversations with our car colleagues and others to make sure that can be continued beyond that point. But, do what's available now, do it fast. That's a win for everyone.
Yeah. So I hear you say, I hear you say fast. Luca, coming back to you and the whole topic around electrification. So Renault has for sure been a forerunner when it comes to electrification, and you've early in the process chosen to go that path, but it might not be the case for all of your colleagues and for the industry as a whole. So do you feel that the European car industry is now ready to massively electrify? Are you ready to deliver the vehicles that are needed? Or coming back to the C word mentioned by Kevin, will China step in to deliver the vehicles that are needed in Europe?
That's an interesting question. By the way, I have an electric bike. I love it, but I don't use it anymore. A lot.
I'll sell you another one.
Yeah. But no, I think, in fact, we have no choice, right? Speaking about choices, because the European Community has decided that, a nice ban in 2035. And for us, 2035 is tomorrow morning because of the innovation cycles. So we are all putting all the thing on electric cars, and not only me, but most of our competitors. Of course, there are a lot of concerns because the reality is that, in particular, China has, I would say, a generation advantage in the control of the whole value chain. So from the control of the mining in some places around the world where the European geopolitics didn't get and they got there, to the fact that they have welcomed chemical industry to refine the product that we actually moved out because we didn't want to have chemical industry in our courtyard, et cetera, and they built the capacity for gigafactories. So you don't find a lot of batteries produced here. So you don't find material, of course, in Europe. You don't find, for sure, 90% of the refinement of cobalt, nickel, manganese, graphite, etc. It's all in China, okay? It's very dirty business in a way, right? So we didn't want to have it here, but they have it there. The advantage now is that they control the material. Then they have the capacity. Then they build the infrastructure, and they build the demand. So China, in China, you have 35% of electric vehicles. They don't want to go to 100%. They want to balance that at a certain point in time, right? We want to go 100%, so I have no choice to go for it. But there are a lot of challenges for us in this transition because I might, we might put money in one thing that we don't completely control. In the past, we used to control all the value chain of, combustion engine. We were the best in the world. So that's the challenge for us. I think that, I'm coming from the board of ASEA this morning, and Sigrid is here. I don't see her in the dark, yeah. And she's the director general. I think that there's nobody in the industry, all my colleagues, all the CEOs of BMW, Mercedes, etc. Nobody has a doubt that we should support the Green Deal, right? Nobody. The question is, how do we do it? How fast are we able to do? Because people like us, at the end of the day, they have to master paradox, every day. So I have to, I have to pay my employee. I have to please my customer, depending on what they ask to me, okay? I have to pay my employees. I have to reward my shareholders. I have to make happy the trade unions. And every time I want to close a plant, then they go into the street. So our job is like this. This is one of the biggest paradoxes for sure I have experienced in the last 30 years in my career, is to actually how to manage that properly. But there is no, let's say, there is no doubt in the industry we have to go that way. If you want my opinion, I think that we should be a little bit more open to, the principle of technological neutrality. So we should give more chances to the engineer, to technician. So the enemy is the CO2 or is the particulate, et cetera, or the NOx, et cetera, but it's not one technology or another. Because if we go only on one direction, it's very, very risky, especially because we have in front of us you know, the Chinese that control the thing. You know, as I said, they have one generation advantage, and we have to catch up very, very quickly. But we will do. I think the industry is very competent, and but it's a very risky game. Yeah, that's what it is. But I just want to leave the room with not with the feeling that we are resisting to the thing. It's very, very challenging. One of the issue of electric cars is that they are more expensive than a combustion engine. So you normally put a 50, 60, 70 kilowatt battery in a normal car. Only the battery, without the engine, without the power electronics, is 4 times the price of a classical combustion engine. So it's there. Yeah. It's like I would give you, you know, 1/3 of the fuel for the whole life of the car would be already on day one into the thing, and that's a little bit of the barrier. So we fear and we see that people, we have to reduce the cost of those things. It will happen. But a lot of people, they don't jump, not only because of lack of infrastructure, etc., but because this thing is bloody expensive. So average age of cars in Europe is going like this, which is not a good sign. So, I mean, but I could talk about that for an hour.
Yeah, and we don't have an hour. But let's turn to one of your customers, Fabien. So you mentioned that you're committed also to reducing...
My potential customer.
Negative externalities linked to city logistics. Do you feel you have the vehicles available on the market to help you make that change, to reduce the size of the vehicles, to have cleaner vehicles, to have a better last urban mile delivery in a city context?
Today, no. We don't. But if we look at the situation compared to maybe 2-3 years ago, it's much better already. I think there is a clear movement. It takes some time to build this infrastructure, this network, for the OEM as well to develop those new vehicles. So we understand that. We also commit as a company to support in preparing the infrastructure by investing quite a lot. Most probably you notice as well in our stores, we have all those loading infrastructure, charging infrastructure available, and this is something that it's really a long-term plan for us. So that's why I also continue to encourage the same message that for us, it's a long-term movement. So, and it costs today, let's be honest. It's investment for the future. So, and as a company, we are always looking for long-term. So that's also one of our identity. We are, let's say, we do not have external shareholders, so we are more, we have the things in our hands to decide as well. So, and I think that's a strong direction for IKEA.
Okay. Long term, yes, but of course we also have a sense of urgency that we have to deal with. Evolution, yes, but we also maybe need a revolution to make that step change. And that means that we need all different means to come together also and to help us move towards a future that is more multimodal, let's say. What we've seen coming up more and more in our city streets is also shared schemes, shared mobility schemes. What we also see is that they are struggling to find a business model, which brings us again to the economic side of the story here. In Antwerp, you are trying to promote shared mobility, and you also engage in partnerships with shared mobility service providers from the private sector. Briefly, Koen, can you tell us a bit about how you try to incentivize them and make them survive as well?
I think the most important thing that we do is talk to entrepreneurs who are willing to help us with a better mobility, and shared mobility is one of those things. It's one of the good alternatives also to bring in for the car and to seduce people to use also those alternatives. And luckily we have already in Antwerp for 12 years today shared bicycles, our typically Avelo, the Antwerp bicycle. It's used very much, and we see that the people of Antwerp have really learned to use shared mobility, and so when other entrepreneurs come in, they're very happy. But what we have done from the start is bring in a very good regulation, and not a regulation that we've made, but we've made it together with the people who want to come in and said, okay, what do we need to make it safe, to make it also let's say, loved by the people around it, because, for instance, the e-scooters, it's always a discussion. They are parked on the most strange places. People are falling over it. And what we did is make a very strong regulation together with them, explaining them why we did it and asking them what it was possible also for them, but also be very ambitious, and we change it sometimes because there is an evolution, of course, also in technology, for instance. And now we have a regulation that also says we check that you do what you have to do. We do it completely digital. And if you don't do it, you get some malus points. And if there are too much, we can punish you. We can, for instance, say, okay, now you have to reduce the number of vehicles that you have on the street. Also there, it's very important. I read about Brussels. They had more than 10,000 vehicles on the street. In Antwerp, we said from the start, maximum 3,000, for instance, e-scooters in Antwerp and spread around the whole city, not all in the historical city center. And by doing that, it helps. And today even we have put out a shared bicycle system that is for the whole transport region. And that's something very new. That's also in rural areas. But we see that it works, and that are electrical bikes, because indeed we see in our figures that people are now driving 10 kilometers far with bicycles, very easy also for commuting to work, for instance. It works, and I think it's very important.
No, I think that's definitely a successful example of a good public-private partnership. Is that the kind of new model that we need, Kevin, to make your micromobility service provider survive? They're struggling. Just yesterday we heard that TIER is laying off 22% of its staff. So what do you need for the business to become commercially viable? And brief answer.
Bluntly, cut the mythology. It's tosh that transportation in any form is commercially viable. You know, you drive a car, you don't build the roads. You go on a public transport scheme, you've probably got an element of subsidy. We're using the tax system to manipulate different choices, whether it's subsidizing company cars or giving kilometer per hour tax breaks for riding a bike in Belgium. So the idea that any one particular subset has to be commercially viable is about their bit of the mix. You know, if you actually run a bicycle company or a car company, yes, you've got to be able to return investment to your shareholders, but the actual ecosystem in which you operate is completely blended finance. Someone's putting in capital here, someone's putting in revenue here, someone's putting in tax breaks there. So we can show, and congratulations to Antwerp, one of the top 10 cities in Europe, according to our benchmarking, very strong performance from some of the French cities on shared mobility, particularly where their relationship with their metropoles allows for a different conversation about it being part of the public transport mix, not just part of some kind of commercial opportunism to try this. And we just have to get that blend so we can say, this is the journey choices we want as part of our ecological and social and city framework. And then what are the cash flows, revenues, tax breaks and capital investments to make those changes happen? And within there, the private sector will play a significant role in attracting investment and in innovation and providing services, but there's going to be public cash. So this is, and public subsidy and public pricing policy. And that seems to me, particularly for shared mobility, we partially made the jump. We partially made the jump where some city will say, this is part of our public transport and mobility ecosystem. And then I get a bunch of nonsense somewhere else going, if it's not a bus, it's not public transport. Sorry, that's rubbish. It's just not true. So to fix this, we take an ecosystem approach, and we take a blended finance approach, and then we have mobility viability. But let's not talk purely commercial viability is the only solution in town. It's nonsense.
Well, it's definitely something that Leuven is doing with its mobility hubs, investing also in shared mobility services and taking its responsibility from that perspective. We need to wrap up, so I would like to, for the final questions, like to ask you to be brief in your statements, but mobility hubs is also something that you are rolling out. So how do you see the role as a public authority in making that multimodal future a reality? And what's the role of mobility hubs in pushing for shared mobility? Very briefly, Harriet.
Yes, we try to scale up in the Netherlands. Our ministry made a plan to roll out hundreds of mini-hubs. That's what we figured out last year, is that it's very important that you have a lot of mini-hubs. We have our world-famous OV feed system. There's a public transport bike. Well, that's a very popular system. But that's only the last mile from the train station to where you want to go. And now we try to roll out this system of a lot of mini-hubs with collective appearance, so look and feel must be recognized by customers, and try to fit that in our public transport system and the whole system of mobility in the Netherlands. And well, that will be the next phase. I'm very curious if we will succeed with that.
Yeah. Fabien, did you want to pick up on a certain point earlier? Or?
No, I was just when we were talking about private-public collaboration, because I just want to share that at least from my side, I have quite a good example about how we can establish that. Because, as I said, so I was working for Retail Switzerland, IKEA Retail Switzerland, and we initiate a project with the city of Zurich, because the city of Zurich, they launched and they got the subsidy from Inno-Swiss organization, so it's a bit like same setup than European, but local Swiss. And so they are financing some innovation project, and this one is one where it's a consortium of public institution, where we have the University of Engineering of Zurich in the lead. We have the City of Zurich, which is part of that. We have 3 retailers, IKEA, H&M, and Zalando. We have transport company, and we have also order orchestrator. So we have all the key, let's say, stakeholders to enable, or what is the best scheme for let's say, goods distribution in a city moving forward. And I just want to connect as well with the hub discussion. At least myself, I'm a strong believer that we need to go through this model of sharing infrastructure. It's not sustainable to continue as a retailer to be mono-brand, have your local contract with your carrier, and especially for us, I have to say, we have to carry a lot of bulky orders, so not only small parcel package. There are a few companies who are able to do that, and that's quite a challenge. So I have to say that this sharing model and how, as a city and the regions, we can influence establishing this infrastructure, I think that's the right way to move forward in my eyes.
Sharing models indeed, and also dynamically managing the scarce urban space that we have. I would like to close the debate by giving the final words to Hannah, coming back to what's been at the core of the Leuven presidency and what I think is also important in this discussion about economy, and that is a just transition. How do we make sure that we don't leave anyone behind? How do we make sure that pricing measures, for example, are not going to harm those which are already the most vulnerable in society? Very briefly, Hannah, very easy question.
Question with a brief answer. So we need a price. We need to have fair prices so that people, when they make a choice freely, and not all people can actually make a choice right now. So there are already inequities in our transportation system. With pricing, we can by design change the equity outcomes. We've looked at those in the US, for example, using Rawls principles of justice or other principles. How do we make the current situation that has inequities better for those that are most vulnerable? And pricing and the policies we design around pricing can actually help, especially when you start using the revenues to redistribute or to invest in alternative travel options so that people actually can choose, which they can't right now. So I think if we are going to make this transition, we need to use charging, we need to control demand, and we need to steer that in the direction where we want it to go. And that in that space, people can make free choices, and that we use the revenues of pricing also to expand those options in the directions that are society beneficial and more inclusive than what we are doing right now, or have done in the past.
Here, here. We have to wrap up. I'm sure we could continue for another hour, but please join me in thanking our panelists for this discussion. Don't go anywhere yet. Just stay with me on stage while I am wrapping up this plenary. I'm very aware that I'm between you and lunch, basically, so I'll be quick. I just want to highlight, because what is clear is that we need cooperation across public and private sectors and different types of stakeholders, and I would like to highlight 2 partnerships that are very valuable to POLIS and that we are also honoring with a formal memorandum of understanding that's being signed at this conference, and that's the partnership between POLIS and the European Parking Association. They bring the parking operators, we bring the cities and the regions, but also the ongoing partnership between POLIS and ALICE that you represent, Fabien, so the logistics sector, to see how we together can come to CO2-free city logistics. Now, what is happening for the rest of the day? So meet the exhibitors during the extended lunch break. There will be pitches from several of them talking about the innovative solutions that they are bringing to the table, which are actual solutions, meeting the needs of cities and regions. And then this afternoon, we will have 2 rounds of parallel sessions where you can further dive more deeply into the topics that we would like to discuss and the challenges as well as solutions that we are facing. And then, of course, not to forget tonight, the dinner, the conference dinner, where we'll come together, followed by the iconic POLIS after party. So I wish you a good lunch break and a great afternoon. Thank you so much.